Woke up early in the morning, grabbed my coffee, now I'm roaring, ready to face the day and getting shit done in business.
Hi, welcome to another episode of our Getting Shit Done in Business podcast, where we dive into deep business topics with industry experts, as well as learn about technology, marketing, and operations in business. My guest today here is Dwight McLeod of Capstone Strategy Group, who is here today to talk about business and AI and process improvement and why business owners need to embrace change. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Dwight.
Thank you, Celine. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So I guess just to get started, give us all a quick introduction to you and your business and your background and why you're here today.
My business. Well, we started probably 20 years ago, and I started process improvement 30 years ago, working within the 9X family, if you can think back to how far along that was. 9X is the predecessor to Verizon, so that was about 30 years ago. And what we found is that we would sit and we would do all these wonderful decision tools, view flow graph, Visio charts and everything else, only to find out when you get to IT, nope, we can't do that. Nope, we can't do that. Nope, we can't do that. So you've got all these brilliant minds sitting in a room deciding what's going to push the business forward, and you've got one group saying no. So we were enamored by that idea, and we tried to help a lot of companies through that process. But then tools started to come out that made it possible not to avoid IT, but to sidestep them when you had to, so that we could do things. So tools like RPA, where you can emulate human behavior with software. And so it made it possible to design those changes and then implement them without having to do a big budget overhaul to get you there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can only imagine, how much that has come in the past, I was going to say the past 20 years, but even in the past 5 years, there have been massive changes to business improvement, business technology, automation. Obviously, AI is quite popular, kind of in the mainstream now, whereas, 5 years ago, it was mostly in the kind of IT technology sector. Now everyone's using it. And I mean, sometimes I see it used as a buzzword when it's not even really AI. That's a whole nother issue. So what are the big things that you have seen kind of change in the past few years that businesses need to embrace? And what are the things that just never change in business?
The thing that changed business more than anything was COVID. COVID made business leaders realize that those beliefs that they had held on to for so long, that you had to be in the office, that you had to do this, that your productivity only came from measuring your keystrokes, etc., really wasn't true. And so they started to see people become much more productive and happier and contributing more to the business as they began to have this hybrid model of work. So that I think I've seen change the most. Unfortunately, business leaders are baby boomers, right? Baby boomers like myself that are approaching 70 or late 60s, and they hold on to beliefs that they developed in the 60s and 70s. And unfortunately, the world has moved well past the 60s and 70s. And so we've got to help them learn how to do the things that are necessary to lead their business effectively nowadays.
Yeah, and I definitely see a lot of that. I mean, I had already been running a remote business for 5 years when COVID hit. So for me, like obviously everything changed in the world, but my business just kind of kept on going. Although we did more consulting around, helping businesses move online. And there was that huge mindset shift that proved that, people can change their mind and adopt a new way of practice. And obviously, I'm a younger woman and many of our clients are, baby boomers, like men in their 60s. We work a lot in the trades, which are, traditionally lower tech industries, law, which is a traditionally like lower tech industry. So every day we face those, I don't want to say uphill battles, but that kind of mindset shift resistance where we're trying to be like, okay, well, what if you just try it this way, or what's holding you back, or what are your hesitations? Like, how do you overcome those when you face that with business owners?
Many times, because we work a lot with government agencies, and their role is really to employ citizens, right? So they can generate tax dollars, etc., through people that are employed. The first thing they say is, wow, if you bring that technology in here, I'm going to have to let a lot of people go. So my first question to them is, so tell me, do you have enough people now to get the work done? And the answer is usually no. No, we don't. So,
Yeah.
so if I relieve them of 60, 70% of their make busy work, and they have that time to focus on your clients, would that be a benefit to you? And so you have to get people thinking. A very good friend of mine says, people don't mind change, they just resist being changed. It's a slight nuance to how you look at it, but when you're forcing people to change something, it's hard. It's like taking a shower, right? You take a shower every morning and you do the same thing day in and day out until you hurt your arm or you hurt your shoulder, and now you can't move that arm where you used to use it. Now you've got to change the way you shower, and it's almost like you're doing something brand new again, right? So it's the same thing when you're trying to get people to change something they've done for years. And it's been moderately successful. They don't hear the sucking noises, which is all the profit being sucked out of their business, because they're doing things in an old-fashioned manner, but they're still making money, so they're happy. It's really getting them to see that there's a different way. I won't call it a better way. There's just a different way, and it can produce different results.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always tell people that automation doesn't reduce jobs. It just reduces the most miserable part of people's jobs. So they can
Right.
spend their energy on more valuable work, more interesting work that actually requires a human brain. And I know, you said, like, you kind of talked about at the kind of high level, like business owner decision maker, they're going to be motivated by profit. If you tell them that they're going to be more profitable, that they can service their clients better with their existing team, and you can talk about the benefits, it's easy to get them on board. But of course, especially, at a government level or with larger businesses, there's a whole bunch of levels of employees, and there might be new grads or people who are younger and they're still learning, so they can be kind of molded, or they're more willing to adapt. And sometimes there are people who have been in the exact same role at the exact same company for 20 years, and they've done everything in the exact same way. And so it's probably like their brain's not as elastic. They really have that strong muscle memory. How do you kind of approach that change management and getting the team buy-in, not just at the leadership level?
So we always start off with understanding your people, your processes, and your technology. And we tell all of our clients, for the first month, you're probably going to think we are the dumbest people you've ever hired, because we're going to ask you questions and you're going to say, you don't understand that. And so we start to ask questions and we start to unravel things. And one of our partners is, I'm going to use the term anal. He asked some of the most minute questions to dig into things. As an example, we started with a 6-page layout of what the business process was. By the time we asked our month's worth of questions, we had 67 pages of process, because people had taken for granted a lot of things that they as humans do, that if I'm going to help software emulate, I've got to know what all those steps are. And so that's how you start to see things. And then people begin to realize, these guys are on something. They know something.
Yeah, that's true. And I bet you find so many gaps in processes or inefficiencies as you're going, where and sometimes people, even as they're saying it out loud, they start to realize that it doesn't make sense, or they're like, why do we do it this way? So when when you're building your solutions, do you find that even just the act of kind of talking it through is already improving the processes? Or do you really try to stick to what they're doing already to start and then go through it as like a second step to refine their processes?
Most people don't know what their processes are. They just don't have a clue, right? So when you start to sit down and say to them, this defines the activity that your people are doing. And we once did a job at an organization in New York City, and we had 3 people doing the same job. One was getting it done in 2 hours, one was getting it done in 2 days, one was getting it done in a week. And so the one that was getting it done in 2 hours was the quote unquote disgruntled employee. But she had been there and been passed over for so many times with younger people coming in. She would train them, they would get promoted, move on, and she never got anywhere because she was the disgruntled person. But she had all the knowledge. Once we got her competence and she started to share with us, there's easier ways to do this. Now we started to reshape the process and show it to people in a laid out format. So it goes from 47 steps to 12 or 15, right? And so the time, that element that it takes reduces tremendously. And so now you can get other things done. Now, because she was disgruntled, she was getting her work done and not doing anything with her extra time. But once we showed her how to get things moving and we got them to recognize her for what she was, she became a model employee and started really turning things out. So sometimes you have to look for those diamonds in the rough that are sitting there underneath the surface, and they just kind of biding time because they're collecting a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks or every month, whatever it is. And they know nobody's interested in what they believe or know. They just kind of go along. This is what you told me to do. That's what I'm going to do. It's stupid, but I'll do it, And once you find those people, man, your job becomes so much more rewarding.
Yeah, that's true. I can't tell you the number of times I've met with someone whose title is maybe like secretary or administrative assistant, but you start talking to them and you realize they're just a severely underpaid director of operations because really they're running the show. But a lot of times their opinion and their voice isn't like valued, and so they don't speak up because in the past they haven't been rewarded for it. And you find out that there's so many inefficiencies that they're just plastering over, because the higher up executives, they don't really care if something's frustrating or not working correctly or anything like that. They just want the end result. So the admin are creating all these like band-aids and patches for processes to keep things running smoothly, when if someone had listened to them, they could have just been so much better for, all these years.
And most of them keep an Excel spreadsheet with all the real things they're doing tucked away somewhere so nobody has it. So when they leave, you got to bring them back as a consultant because nobody knows what they're doing.
Yep, we've definitely seen that. Or, you mentioned there's 3 people who do one job, and that's good with cross-training when processes are documented. But we've also worked where there's only one person out of a 7-branch firm or an 80-employee firm, only one person who knows how to do this, or only one person who does this task. So if they go away or get sick or leave, suddenly there's this huge knowledge gap and nobody knows how to do their job because they had no cross-training at all.
Right, and they had no process. Nobody knows what they did to get the job done. They just got it done. They never left. And so nobody ever said, we should do something about that. It's a choke point, yeah.
So for any kind of business owners listening who, I speak to people every day who are like, I know I need processes, but I have no idea where to start. What would you recommend as a first step for businesses who know they need processes documented, but they're not really sure how to go about doing it?
You're probably never going to get it done with your own people, right? They're well-intended, they mean well, but in many cases, they have other agendas as well. We just worked with a company that's really, really huge, and one of their directors saw the process road as his road to the VP job. And he was blocking anybody that came in, trying to tell him that he didn't have the right answer to the question. So that was one thing. And while we were sitting and talking to folks, there was one person in the room that I just kind of felt was an empty suit. He was well-meaning and well-intended, but when you ask him questions, you never got an answer. And then there was another person in the room that was threatened by the fact that you were going to clean up what they hadn't been able to clean up in 10 years. And that threatened them, and they tried to derail the work. So you have to get to We call it 3x3 association. You have to be associated in the C-suite. You have to be associated in the middle level of leadership. And you have to know the people down in the trenches because they're the ones that are going to do things. I was working for the Attorney General's office, and one of the lawyers came to me and said, yeah, okay, make all the suggestions you want. These people aren't going to do anything. Now, she was a lawyer doing this thing every single day, and she knew how bad it was. But she said, yeah, they've done this before. The people at the top just don't do anything. So you've got to be associated all three levels so you can help the folks in the middle, help the folks at the bottom, and then manage up to those at the top and say, there's a reason why we need to do this.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, even in smaller organizations or ones that are, I don't want to say less dysfunctional, but more well-meaning who really do want to do it, people are just so busy with their day-to-day responsibilities that they don't have time to be, diving deep into this. They don't really understand, how to write a process. They don't maybe have, I don't want to say a lack of clarity, but like you said, they just do it all the time without thinking about it. So maybe when they're writing down, these steps, they just automatically miss things that they take for granted too.
And they also, they don't think through everything they do because some of it's embedded knowledge. And it's not a thought process. I just do it in the morning. I come in, I turn this on, I do this. And, the first three things I do are this. Well, they don't consider that part of the process, right? I go out and grab data. We were working with an organization that does bonding for New York State, a lot of bonding, all of the projects, etc. They would come in every morning and they would go out and get their bond positions on every bond they had floated. And that took about 3.5, 4 hours. And from that, they would make choices or decisions about whether they should trade out of one or buy more of this or do that. And so when we showed them how to do it in 15 minutes, wow, people were intimidated. They're like, wait a minute. I said, but I can do it at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And before you go to lunch, you can have a trend that says, okay, I should be doing these things. Well, that took away a lot of their reason for being. And so they didn't want anything to do with it, So
yeah,
it's that kind of resistance that you find and you have to overcome. You have to really get to know people. You have to be a people person. That's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you ever find that sometimes you can't overcome resistance because the problem is the person? Or do you find that most of the time you're able to work with people?
There are times where you're just not going to overcome it. There's a person that's entrenched. They may not like you for whatever reason. They've already made that decision. They don't know you, but they just decided they don't like what you're offering and they're not going to listen to it. And if they're high enough up the chain, your project's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find a lot of times, at least someone somewhere in any organization has had a bad experience with a past consultant who either didn't do a good job or at least their perception was that the consultant, useless, talking head. I've heard lots of unflattering ways to describe a consultant who, came in and maybe either didn't fully understand the business or they wanted to put their perceptions on the business, or put their process or their mold on a business where it didn't fit, or, for whatever reason, people have a lot of misconception about, process consulting, about operations consulting, about business consultants, where it kind of adds this extra level of resistance before you even start. Is that something that you know?
One of the things that we tried not to do is represent anybody's product because we don't feel we can be objective if we come into your business and we've got something we want to sell you, right? Because that's our objective now, to sell you this tool. If that's the case, then we're not going to look at what you have, nor are we going to be objective about the way we go about making recommendations, because it's all going to be centered around our objective. And so we try not to ever do that. We work with what you have in place. We'll let you know. We went to one place and they had a key piece of software that Microsoft was no longer servicing and hadn't serviced for the last 5 years. So if it ever went down, they were stuck. So we made them aware of that, but we didn't change that software. That's your call if you want to change it. We're just telling you the danger that you face if anything ever happens. No longer consultants that can fix this. Microsoft won't help you. So you're in trouble if anything happens to this. Our recommendation would be that you find another way of getting that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I understand why it's an easy trap for consultants to fall into, because it's really easy to learn, one software and learn it really, really, really well and to fully customize it. And I mean, the pitfalls are exactly what you said. I've heard, people say, oh, these consultants, they just had this project management system and they give like everyone kind of the same business blueprint template, and it didn't work for a business at all. And also, a lot of softwares offer like affiliate commission too, which I guess is attractive to consultants. So I understand why people do it, but the truth is there is no one best software for any business. Like our approach, we usually, we get to know the business's needs, what functionality they're looking for, their priorities, their processes. And then we put together a spreadsheet comparing, our kind of top 3 to 5 options that we find based on their needs. And we work through it with the client. We do demos with the client, and same thing as you, like we help the client make the right choice for them, because there might be like this gold standard of CRM. I'm not saying, I'm not going to list names.
Everybody wants Salesforce. Not everybody needs Salesforce. I'm telling you.
Most people don't need Salesforce. It's large businesses, definitely a lot of people can use it, but it's expensive to set up. It's expensive to, customize and maintain. You need a dedicated sales team to use it. You can't just have it kind of floating around for everyone. The one in my head was HubSpot, but it's the same kind of thing. Because, we work with, for example, small trades companies. They get so overwhelmed looking at Salesforce, looking at HubSpot, looking with anything with, as they say, too many features, where really they just need something that they can quickly and easily manage from their phone on the road, that they can put in their contacts, that syncs with their text really well, that has a very streamlined like user interface, doesn't have too many fields, doesn't have too many like different kind of workflows or complicated integration. Well, I mean, integrations are good, but like not overly complicated where they get overwhelmed and they get scared when it's just going to be, there's field service technicians using it too. So it's not always about finding the best software, because that doesn't exist. It's like, what is the best software for this business and their needs?
We try to give them 3 options. We give them the Cadillac version, Salesforce. We give them the Chevrolet, HubSpot, and then we give them the Hyundai, Zoho Desk, and say, okay, there are 3 different price points. They all have different features. This is for enterprise level businesses that, as you say, have a dedicated force to deal with it all the time. This down here is not. It doesn't have all the capabilities of this one, but right now you don't need that. So maybe you should kind of grow into what you need, because we find that businesses have basically certain points where they need to make changes, right? Up to $1.5 million, $2 million, most people are doing it themselves, right? 2 million to 5 million is where you start seeing there is a need to change. At 10 million, yes, you need clear processes and things taking place. By the time you get to 200 million, if you don't have those things in place, I don't know how you got there, right? I just don't know how you got there. Somebody's working 24/7, 365.
Yeah, I laugh because as you were saying that, I was thinking the same thing. Like, if somebody, how would you get to $200 million with no processes?
Exactly.
Probably wouldn't, for sure.
Yeah. You stall somewhere around, I'd say 7 million. You'd probably stall, because you can effectively run 7 million using Excel spreadsheets. Right?
Yeah.
And all you need is a good bookkeeper, a good accountant, so you can do your ins and outs, so that you know where your business is, where your receivables are, where your billables are. Yeah, you can do that. But after you get above that, it's not going to happen.
So what is kind of some final advice you'd give to businesses who, want to start improving their processes right away, or they want to take that step? Like, what sort of advice would you give to businesses to get that in place if they haven't done that already?
Trust your people. because they know what's going on. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. That's just not going to happen. And trust your instincts. You've been doing this a while. You've gotten where you are because of your instincts. Trust them. Stop reading all these get smarter books that are out there. Learn what you know about your business and go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dwight. And for everyone else listening, we're about to start part 2 of this, where we're going to talk more about change in business and technology and AI. So please tune in for our next episode and find us on SoundCloud, on Spotify, on iTunes, on YouTube, anywhere where you listen to your podcast. The next episode is linked at the end of this one as well.
Teamwork hard, let's make progress. Getting shit done in business.